In the misty forests and along the winding rivers of ancient Eastern Europe, the pagan Slavs lived in a world alive with gods, spirits, and unseen forces that demanded respect and reciprocity. Among their most profound religious practices were sacrifices, rituals through which they sought to honor the divine, ensure fertility of the land, secure victory in battle, and maintain the delicate balance between the human realm and the spiritual one. These offerings, ranging from simple grains and food to valuable animals and, in rarer and more extreme cases, human lives, formed the heartbeat of Slavic paganism before the gradual arrival of Christianity between the 8th and 13th centuries. The Slavic cosmos was structured around a great world tree, often imagined as an oak, connecting the heavens ruled by Perun, the thunder god, with the underworld domain of Veles, the serpentine god of earth, water, and cattle. Sacrifices were the primary way to communicate across these realms. Procopius of Caesarea, writing in the 6th century, described how the Slavs believed in a single supreme god, the maker of lightning, clearly Perun, to whom they sacrificed cattle and other victims. In times of illness or impending war, they would vow specific offerings if they survived, viewing the act as a transaction that purchased their safety. Rivers, nymphs, and lesser spirits also received tributes, with divination often performed during these rites to interpret the will of the gods. Animal sacrifice was the most common and widespread form. Bulls, oxen, rams, goats, horses, and cockerels were offered, particularly to Perun, whose worship involved blood offerings that fed both the god and the community through communal feasts afterward. These rituals took place in sacred groves, on hilltops, near holy springs, or in temples like the famous one at Rethra, dedicated to Radegast among the Polabian Slavs. Priests or tribal leaders would slaughter the animal according to strict customs, often draining its blood as an offering to the earth or idols, then roasting the meat for a shared banquet that strengthened social bonds and divine favor. Archaeological evidence from sites in Poland and Russia reveals bones, eggs, and ritual vessels buried as foundational offerings under houses or in fields, suggesting sacrifices accompanied everyday life events, such as building new homes or ensuring bountiful harvests. Perun, depicted as a mighty warrior wielding thunderbolts and associated with eagles and oak trees, received some of the most significant tributes. His rivalry with Veles, who stole cattle or disrupted order, symbolized the eternal struggle between sky and earth, order and chaos. Sacrifices to Perun often involved bulls or rams, whose blood was seen as particularly potent. In contrast, Veles, linked to the underworld and wealth, might receive offerings of grain, honey, or animals associated with the earth. These acts were not mere destruction, but acts of exchange. The life force of the animal nourished the gods, who in turn granted protection, rain for crops, or success in raids. Human sacrifice, though less frequent and more debated among historians, appears in several historical accounts and likely occurred during crises or major communal needs. Christian chroniclers, often hostile, describe such practices with horror, yet their reports align with broader patterns in Indo-European pagan traditions. The primary chronicle mentions prisoners of war sacrificed to Perun. Leo the Deacon recorded Rus's warriors under Sviatoslav offering captives according to ancestral customs. Among the Lutici, Bishop John of Mecklenburg was sacrificed to Radegast in 1066, his head offered on a pole. Ibn Fadlan's famous account of a Russ's ship funeral includes the voluntary sacrifice of a slave girl who joined her master in death through ritual strangulation and stabbing, followed by cremation, a practice blending Scandinavian and Slavic elements. In some regions, especially among Eastern Slavs, chthonic beings received human offerings, sometimes involving live burial or other grim methods. Victims might be volunteers, chosen by lot, or prisoners. These rites were secretive by later centuries as Christianity spread, making documentation sparse. Widows occasionally followed husbands into death through hanging or burning on the pyre, though this was not universal. Such acts reflected a worldview where death was not an end, but a passage, and the sacrifice of one life could sustain the community or appease restless spirits. Sacrifices were deeply tied to the agricultural calendar and life cycles. Spring rituals sought fertility for fields and herds. Harvest festivals thanked the gods with first fruits and animals. Funerary rites included offerings to ancestors whose spirits lingered and required nourishment through food left at graves or burned. Communal banquets, known as brachina or slava in later folk traditions, preserved pagan echoes, where meat from sacrificed animals was shared in memory of the dead or patron spirits. Sacred lakes received throne offerings during festivals to avert storms. Even in times of epidemic, desperate measures like secret processions or buried victims persisted into the 19th century in remote Russian villages. The places of sacrifice held special power. Sacred groves with ancient oaks dedicated to Perun were off-limits for ordinary cutting of wood. Idols carved from wood or stone, sometimes multi-headed to represent multiple aspects of divinity, stood in temples or open-air sanctuaries. Offerings included not only blood but also weapons, jewelry, food, and symbolic items like painted eggs or plows. Foundations of buildings sometimes contained ritual deposits, animal skulls or vessels, to secure the structure against malevolent forces. As Slavic tribes encountered Christianity, these practices faced suppression. Vladimir the Great of Kievan Rus erected a grand pantheon in Kiev, including Perun before his own conversion in 988, during which he ordered idols toppled and sacrifices ended. Yet pagan customs lingered in folklore, seasonal rites, and hidden traditions. The word treba, meaning need or requirement, survived in Slavic languages to denote both necessity and ritual offering, with place names echoing ancient sacrifice sites. Scholars debate the extent of human sacrifice, noting that many accounts come from biased outsiders who portrayed Slavs as barbarians. Archaeological finds of mass graves or unusual burials provide tantalizing but inconclusive evidence. What remains clear is that sacrifice was central to a pragmatic spirituality. The gods required their due, and humans fulfilled it to thrive in a harsh world of forests, steppes, and constant threats. Balance was everything, offering life to sustain life. In modern times, reconstructed Slavic paganism, or rodnovery, revives symbolic offerings of bread, mead, or flowers rather than blood, emphasizing harmony with nature over literal ancient rites. Yet the spirit endures. The idea that giving thanks and making exchanges with the unseen world fosters prosperity and connection. The ancient Slavs did not worship in fear alone, but in profound respect for the forces shaping their existence. Through fire, blood, and communal feast, they wove their lives into the eternal cycle of the world tree, where every sacrifice was a prayer for continuity amid the thunder of Perun and the whispers of vales. This rich tapestry of ritual reveals a people deeply attuned to their environment and ancestry, for whom sacrifice was not cruelty, but the sacred cost of survival and divine favor in a living, breathing universe.